Hello, thanks for stopping by. I'm so glad you're here. In my last video, I went through the process of deciding what I wanted to sew, and I settled on this cool 1916 Royal Flying Corps officer's jacket. So in this video, I thought I would go through the process of turning it from an idea into a reality, an actual project that I can get started on. So what I'm going to do is figure out a supplies list, and part and parcel with that is figuring out my budget. I also need to get a clear idea of what I want from this project. What sort of properties do I need this coat to have? What sort of conditions am I going to be wearing it in, and what do I want from it? What sort of fabrics I choose and what sort of budget I have is going to be heavily affected by what I want from the end product. So I really need to stop and think about that. This is a reconstructing history pattern based on an actual type of garment that was worn in history. And part of the fun of that is researching the original garment and to use that history to inspire my own modern clothing. So I've gone down a little bit of a rabbit hole looking into the fabric, but it's been a fun process. I started out just using the information that the pattern gave me, which was that these jackets were originally made of khaki serge wool. Starting out by just looking up khaki serge, I found that it is a type of wool twill that was used for military uniforms starting at the end of the 19th century on into the early 20th century. And there's a specific type of British khaki that was a wool serge used for a lot of uniforms. So that's interesting, but also kind of obvious. What was this fabric? It was a fabric used to make military uniforms in the place and time that this jacket was from. So my next question was, what would it actually be like to wear this fabric? So I tried to look up a few first-hand accounts of people who have actually worn it. And I found this one in particular I think is kind of interesting from a website called Past Participants. This man has worn a historically accurate British uniform made out of khaki serge. What this guy says is that he understands why they use the material. It would have been a very practical choice. Very warm, very durable. It looks like a very recognizable uniform. Some of the downsides, he reports though, are that it can absorb quite a lot of water. So if you are in a uniform standing out in the rain all day, it's going to be sodden and take forever to dry out. But the number one drawback this gentleman reports, and that I have read elsewhere, is that it was very, very itchy. So with looking up a little bit of information about the fabric and a few accounts of people who have worn it, I think I know enough to cross it off my list of fabrics that I actually want to use for this project. As I read a few accounts of what it's like to wear khaki serge, that gave me a few ideas for what I don't want from a coat. And one of them being, I don't want something that's going to absorb a lot of water. I also don't want anything that's going to be itchy inside or out. So I can definitively cross this historic khaki serge off of my list of potential fabrics, but I do want to still see if I can find some modern equivalents to it, just out of curiosity. So the next thing I did was just start looking up some information about the coat itself. There is a lot of information about it out there, actually, lots of pictures. There were different variations of it in different years for different ranks. And when I started looking into the different types of this jacket, I realized that some were made from a better quality material than others. The itchy wool serge material would have been used for the lower ranking officers, but there are examples of higher ranking officers' jackets being made from a much nicer wool twill. So if I can find a nicer quality wool twill that looks the part, then I could still go for a more historically accurate look to this if I want to. I also want to line this jacket, so as I was looking up information about what they were made out of, I kept my eyes open for what they were lined with. And what I found out kind of makes sense. The lower quality khaki serge jackets for the lower ranking officers were usually lined with cotton, like a polished cotton, something like that. A pretty standard lining for the time. And the higher ranking officers' jackets that were made from the finer wool twill were lined with silk. It seems strange to me at first that there would be such a variation between how two jackets were made, even though they were just different ranks of officers. But I guess there was still a very strong class system in Britain at the time, and the military officers definitely reflected that class system. So my next step will be to look up some finalists for the fabric, figure out a budget, and do some shopping. It's a couple of days later now, and I have researched some different fabrics, thought about my budget a little bit more. I think I have decided to try to constrain this budget as much as possible. So that will probably push me away from the real wool, and I'm going to be looking at either synthetic materials or some sort of like durable cotton. I did still find some of the best fabric options I could if I wanted to make this period accurate. So I'm just going to go through the more period accurate options that I was able to find, and then I will show you the cheaper option that I decided to go with. This first one looks about as period accurate as you can get. It is sold from Bayes Wool Fabrics, based out of the UK. It is called Uniform Cloth, World War I British Khaki. I think that's it right there. The big downside to it is that it is 75 pounds per meter. So 75 pounds per meter, if my calculations are correct, that is 103 US dollars-ish per meter, which is far, far beyond my budget here. That would put me over $500 just for the shell fabric. And this is just Holly Hobby home sewing. Like, I'm not here to do anything that crazy. Moving on to the best substitute I could find for that British khaki that is much, much cheaper would be this US wool serge cloth from World War II. This is from atthefront.com, and they specialize in World War II reproductions. So this is going to give you American wool serge from World War II, not British khaki serge from World War I. But I think it'd be an acceptable substitute if you wanted to move into the period correct neighborhood without breaking the bank, because this is $29.99 per yard, so 30 bucks a yard. That's going to shave over $70 per yard off of your project and make it much, much more manageable. So much so that this was actually an option that I rattled around in my head a little bit until I decided I wanted to go cheaper. So the next fabric is going to be more in the neighborhood of one of the fancy officer's jackets that was made from a finer wool twill. So this is fur green parchment twill wool double cloth, going for $39.99 a yard. So you're going back up there a little bit. As it sits right now, they have 5 yards left, so I don't know how much longer this is going to last. But it is a 100% wool twill. It has got the sort of British khaki look to it. This is also an option that I definitely toyed with before I decided I wanted to bring the budget down a little bit. After looking at fabrics that I thought were most historically accurate, or at least best matched the look of the historically accurate garments, I decided that I wanted to scale the budget back a little bit, and I really thought about what I wanted from this coat. So first of all, like I said before, I don't want it to be itchy. Second, I now realize that I want it to be kind of affordable, so I'm looking for cheaper fabrics. Third, I have decided I want it to be machine washable. So when I'm out in the elements in Chicago during the winter, there's a lot of snow, there's a lot of salt and slush that gets pushed around. And sometimes when I'm on the L or the bus, I don't think about it, and if I'm wearing a backpack, I sit it down on the floor. And then when I pick it back up and put it on, I end up with a line of salt along the back of my coat that I need to wash out, and I don't want to have to go to the dry cleaners every time that happens. Mostly, I just want this to be a durable, functional garment that I can wear during the winter, and hopefully wear during mini winters. So when I was looking for fabrics, I focused on ones that weren't itchy, fairly cheap, were machine washable. That definitely moved me in the neighborhood of heavier duty cottons, you know, the cotton ducks, the cotton twills, that sort of neighborhood. And I found a fabric that matched my criteria exactly from my favorite local fabric store, Vogue Fabrics. This Grim Army cross-woven Loden green with black brushed cotton duck cloth fabric. That's a mouthful. But anyways, it was already cheap to begin with. It was originally $6.19 a yard, but they were almost out of it, and it was on clearance to finish off the rest of it at $4.49 a yard. So they had 4.75 yards of it left. I snapped it up all online. I didn't want to take the chance of going into the store. And they're also in the process of closing their retail location and moving it to their their warehouse. And I'm not always able to find things in the retail location that they have in their warehouse. So I bought this online just to make sure I could get it. So this is 100% cotton, 60 inches wide, army green with a sort of dark black to it. So this is definitely going to move the look of this coat into the more modern army area. But I think I have seen this fabric in person before, and if it's the one I remember, I was very happy with it, so I don't regret spending the money on it. And if it isn't the one I was thinking of, it's still probably going to be good, and it wasn't that expensive, so I'm not super upset about it. Are you okay there? So my next step is to actually go to the fabric store, pick it up, and I am going to get the lining to go with it. Then I have to prep the fabric and then get everything ready to start sewing. All right, I have gone to the fabric store and picked up my fabric, and I am very, very happy with it. So I'm going to show you real quick, starting with something that is actually not part of this project. This is a bonus fabric I decided to pick up. It's this yellow, I don't know what to call it. It's sort of a loosely woven or roughly woven cotton. It's very soft. It's not rough. It's just loosely woven. This is actually a cousin to the blue fabric I used to make the shirt I was wearing in the last clip, I think. And I was so happy with that shirt that I decided I'm going to pick up this yellow fabric and to make a version of that blue shirt out of this yellow fabric. So I don't know, I might revisit that vintage shirt pattern in a video again. I don't know, is that bad form to make multiple videos using the same pattern? Now, the fabric I bought online, this cotton duck, it has a nice heavy weight to it. I'm actually very happy with this. I was thinking it was going to turn out to be sort of, the army green cotton canvas sort of feeling, but it has a much more softer feel to it. It's 100% cotton, but it almost has a rubberiness to it, if that makes sense. I have so much of this fabric, it's just enveloping me. It is not the just standard army green canvas sort of feel. If you look at it, there's almost like a honeycombish sort of, a very fine honeycomb texture on this side, and then on the back it is smoother. I'm excited to get started making the coat out of this. I think it has enough structure to it that you can make a nice well-tailored jacket out of it, but it is not too heavy. It has a nice nod to the military uniform look without being too on the nose. It's just really kind of a cool fabric, so I'm very, very happy I found it. And I am beyond pleased at the $4.50 a yard I paid for it. Moving on to the lining I found. I'm going to have to refold this, and God help me. This is the lining I'm going to use, and I think it's definitely the biggest risk I'm taking. It is a synthetic taffeta, so it is polyester. I do tend to avoid using non-biodegradable fabrics as much as possible. But sometimes they are just the most practical option, and I think that's going to be the case this time, because what I'm looking for is some insulation value, but very, very lightweight. Synthetic materials aren't necessarily insulating in the sense of being warm and fuzzy, but they are insulating in the sense of they don't breathe very well. So that's going to add warmth to the coat just by the fact that it doesn't breathe very well. So apart from me talking about this lining like it is entirely practical, it is also kind of cool. It's a synthetic taffeta. So it's definitely a nod to silk linings, but it has this cool sort of khaki color to it, but it also has a sort of bluish iridescence. It also has a nice crispness to it that will help add structure to the coat. So this will definitely have some practical value to it, but I also think that the iridescent khaki taffeta is kind of a cheeky nod to traditional military colors, traditional masculine colors. So I want to get started prepping these. I want to overcast the edges. Especially on this taffeta, seems to be fraying a little bit. Since this is a synthetic, you wouldn't necessarily have to launder it before you sew with it, but I do intend to launder this jacket, so this lining will be laundered fairly regularly, and any item that I make that I intend to launder after it's done, I want to launder the fabric before I make it using the same method that I will use after it's done. I also want to take some of the crispness out of this taffeta to soften it up a little bit, because I'm not making a big structured dress out of it or anything like that. I'm making a lining. So I'm going to wash this on a gentle cycle in cold water and dry it the same way. I already mentioned that I bought this shell fabric online for $4.49 a yard. The taffeta was normally $27 a yard, $26.99. Because Vogue Fabrics are shutting down their retail location, or moving their retail location to their warehouse, they're doing a big sale at the retail location, and this was $5.99 a yard rather than $26.99 a yard. So happy with that. This was $7.99 a yard. Again, I think that is cheaper than it normally would have been. I'm going to overcast the edges on this one too, then launder it like normal. And the same for this one. Since this is the first time washing them, I don't know if there's going to be any color bleeding or anything. I'm especially unsure of this taffeta. I had never worked with anything like this before. 5 yards of it. I don't know if there's going to be any color bleed, and so I'm going to wash everything by itself. I finished laundering my fabric, and then I cut out the paper pattern to a size 44. The size 44 corresponds to a 44-inch chest measurement, which that ain't me. I am a 40-inch chest. But the size 44 also corresponds to a 39-inch waist measurement. But that ain't me either. I have a 37-inch waist measurement. So why did I go with the size 44? Well, that's because the size 42, the next size down, corresponds to a 36-inch waist measurement, which is close enough for government work to my waist measurement. And then I went one size bigger than the size that will fit my waist measurement because I will want to wear this over bulky clothing, possibly a hoodie, during the winter. Now I want to be careful not to mess up the silhouette of this jacket too much because it is designed to emphasize that traditional masculine look of broad shoulders, narrow waist with a nice V, and then widen out just a little bit on the hips again. So that's why I'm doing the mock-up. I want to see how it fits. I just want to be very careful that I don't get it too tight in the waist, especially because this jacket has a vent in the back, and I have made jackets before with vents in the back where I got a little bit too tight in the waist, and the vent is always just a little bit open and awkward, and it doesn't look good. So I wanted to be very, very careful to give myself too much room to begin with so I can shrink it down rather than start too small and you can't really make it much bigger. So if I cut out the pattern too big, that's not the end of the world, but if I cut it out too small, that's a big problem. I don't really want to make this mock-up, but I know I should, and I know I need to take my time and do it carefully because a poorly made mock-up is basically just a giant waste of time. Even worse, if I don't take my time and make the mock-up carefully, then I might end up making changes to the pattern that I ought not have and end up just causing a bunch of problems for myself. So I am lucky enough that a standard medium size usually fits me quite well, and I can make things off of patterns without modifications that fit pretty well. So 9 times out of 10, I really don't need to make a mock-up. But in this case, I'm really not sure of the fit, and I'm not sure of the construction process. So I think it's a good idea to stumble through the mock-up process first to figure things out and get the fit straight, and then start on the actual construction. So I'll get started on the mock-up now, and I guess I will come back to you when the mock-up is done. So I'm finished with the mock-up. Pay no attention to the arm size on this thing. I set in the sleeves and they were weird. I ripped them out again and tried to fix it, and I set them in again and they were weird, and then I ripped them out again and tried to fix it. And by that time, the arm size and the sleeve caps were starting to get kind of frayed and messy, and I think I figured out what I was doing wrong anyways. There is a little bit of extra bulk on the back shoulder of the sleeves, and I think that would account for, you know, guys with broader, more muscular shoulders. It would give them some space in the back, and it would also make sure they have plenty of room for reaching and moving without the back ripping out. So I'm probably going to end up gathering the shoulder cap a little bit more, or even just taking a little bit of extra seam allowance around the back of the arm when I set it in. And I think that'll be fine. Even still having a little bit of extra bulk in the back shoulder wouldn't bother me too much, especially since I plan on wearing this over like a hoodie or something. So I'll have like an undershirt, like a flannel, a hoodie, and then this thing. So there will be a lot of bulk underneath this jacket. The main fit adjustments I did was just move the side darts back 1.5 inches so that they sit directly underneath my armpit. And then I just took an extra 1/4 inch in the gorge dart to flatten the chest a little bit, since I don't have the big, you know, muscular military build that this jacket was designed to fit. This is still kind of roomy, and I could go down a size on it if I wanted to, but like I said, I'm going to be wearing it over other layers, so I want that little bit of extra room. The changes were pretty minimal, and I think I'm pretty happy with the fit. The back vent hangs naturally, you know, it doesn't splay open from the jacket being too tight. There's still, you know, a little bit of shape on the sides. I did cut out the shorter style, so this would be a jacket, and it is still almost to my knees, so I need to shorten it. What I did on the pattern there was just find the waistline, the narrowest part, marked a line there, and then went down 1.5 inches, marked another line. Then I brought the bottom line up to meet the top line, and then I redrew the side dart over the folds, so that should bring this up just a little bit, and I think it will make this area fit a little bit nicer too. I wasn't too aggressive taking length off though, because I want some extra room on the bottom for the hem still, and to see what it looks like then. And if I do need to shorten it a little bit after that, I can just take another inch or so off the bottom, and I don't think it will mess the proportions up. But it is time to get started cutting out the pattern now, and I get to start working with my fabric, which is always one of my favorite parts of the project when I actually get to start handling the fabric more. All right, that is it. That's all she wrote for this video. I cut out all of the pattern pieces from the main fabric, the lining. I also cut out interfacing. So I just interfaced the facings and the collar. I cut out all of my fabric from the lining material as well. Both the outer and lining fabric fray a lot, so I just overcast the edges of all of them to keep them from fraying. So that took a little bit, but I think it will be worth it so they don't fray apart while I'm working with them. Now it's time to get started on the actual construction of the jacket. I am also trying to figure out how I'm going to do the pockets, because I have seen pictures of the period pockets that are supported by an extra cloth waistband, but I'm not exactly sure how to do that, so I'm trying to figure that out. So after the pockets, I'm going to go ahead and make the buttonholes, and after the pockets and the buttonholes, it really will be time to start sewing the main seams of the garment. But that will all be covered in my next video, which I am excited to get started on. Right now, I need to get started editing this video. Thank you so much for watching. I am very flattered that anybody at all is interested enough to watch my videos. If you've enjoyed the video, please consider liking it. And if you haven't subscribed, please consider doing that as well. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the future.